My brothers and sisters, the Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. As Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a sizable crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind man, the son of Timaeus, sat by the roadside begging. On hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he kept calling out all the more, "Son of David, have pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, get up, Jesus is calling you." He threw aside his cloak, sprang up, and came to Jesus. Jesus said to him in reply, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man replied to him, "Master, I want to see." Jesus told him, "Go your way, your faith has saved you." Immediately he received his sight and followed him on the way. The Gospel of the Lord.
In the 10th chapter of Mark's Gospel, Jesus asks the same question twice. What do you want from me? What do you want from me? Last week, he asked James and John that question. And this week, we hear him ask a blind man named Bartimaeus. Now, last week, when he asked James and John, and before I tell you what their answer was, it's important to understand who James and John were. They weren't just apostles. They were two of the three most important apostles. Along with Peter, whenever Jesus had something really important to do, James and John and Peter were selected to go with him. For the Transfiguration, the three of them went up the mountain. In the Garden of Gethsemane, the three of them went with Jesus off a little further along the way. And so these two men, James and John, are really important to Jesus, and they're close to Jesus. And when Jesus asks them, "What do you want from me?" their response is, "We want power, glory, and honor." They want to sit at the left and the right of Jesus, which would be power, glory, and honor. That's what they asked Jesus for. Now, in this week's gospel, Jesus is leaving a town called Jericho, which they say is about 15 miles from Jerusalem, which in the time of Jesus is 1 day's journey. So Jesus is just 1 day away from entering into Jerusalem, where he knows he's going to be crucified and die. And so he's got a lot on his mind. And this is his one big last day before he goes into that passion. And he stops along the way and hears this man calling him, "Jesus, Son of David." And Bartimaeus is this blind man. Now, he's not just blind, because being blind in our day and age is not as same as being blind in the time of Jesus. We make a lot of efforts to include everyone in our society, to welcome them into the community, and make extra effort to make sure that all those who struggle with disabilities have a place in our community. But in the time of Jesus, a blind person would just be left on the corner to beg for money. They weren't really fully able or allowed to participate with everyone else in the community. So when Jesus asks this man, "What do you want from me?" he's not just asking to be allowed to see. He's asking for a lot more than just physical sight. He's saying to Jesus, "I want to have sight so that I can be fully participating in the communion, that I can be one with the people again, and that I can share in all the life of the community." So it's not just sight that he's looking for. He's looking for completeness, for community, for that oneness that he wants to share not only with God, but with everyone. So on the one hand, we have the apostles. They want honor and glory. And on the other hand, we have this blind man who wants to be complete and united with his community. And of course, Jesus grants him that. Then we come to the response. How do the apostles last week respond to the request of James and John when they ask for honor, glory, and power? They're upset. They're mad. And they're mostly mad because they're like, wow, we should have asked for that first. And so their response is bitterness and disappointment and anger. Today, we hear Bartimaeus respond when he is healed, when Jesus brings him completely into the community and to that oneness with everyone. What does he do? He throws off his cloak and he follows Jesus along the way. And that word, along the way, is really significant to the early Christians because they didn't really at first consider themselves different from Jewish people. They considered themselves just a continuation of the Jewish people, and they called themselves the Way. So they were following the way of Jesus. And so when it says Bartimaeus followed the way, that means he followed Jesus. And as I said earlier, 1 day's journey from Jerusalem. So he followed Jesus to Jerusalem to be with him in his hour of pain and need. And he threw off his cloak. So he doesn't look for riches and honor and glory. He looks to be one with the community, and he follows Jesus. And the question is, do we understand the identity of Jesus in that question? Because for us, we have to decide, if Jesus came to us and said, what do you want from me? You know, a lot of us would say, well, I'd like a good paying job, or I'd like my family to be healthy. I'd like a new car. I'd like to win the lottery. You know, so many times I wish I used to pray for that. I used to buy a lottery ticket and think, oh, Lord, if I just won the lottery, it would all be okay, right? That's not the way it works. But that's what people do a lot of times, and sometimes we all do that. But can we be like Bartimaeus? When Jesus comes to us and asks us, what do we want from me? Can we say, Lord, please make me whole so that I can be one with you and one with all the Christians in the world? That's what Jesus wants us to hear. He wants us to be able to, as Bartimaeus did, cast off our cloak and follow him. You know, a cloak was a very important thing for a person in Jesus' time. It was pretty much probably Bartimaeus' only real possession. As a blind person begging for money, he probably only made enough just to eat, and that cloak was everything he had in the world. So imagine if, you know, Jesus came to you and said, what do you want from me? And he gave you that wholeness to be with him. Could you just abandon your car? Could you just cast it aside and follow Jesus? Could you cast aside what's holding you back from Jesus? Because something's holding all of us back at one time or another. Whatever that is, whether it's anger or resentment or disappointment or frustration, can we cast that aside, trust in the Lord, and follow Jesus? That's what he's asking us to do. He's saying to us, I will free you from all of those things if you just cast them aside and follow me. In a little while, we're going to celebrate the Eucharist. Are we going to see Jesus in the breaking of the bread? Can we recognize him in that moment? And then can we recognize Jesus in each and every one we meet? Because ultimately, that's what God wants us to see. He wants us to see himself in each of us. And he wants us to see God in each person that we meet, no matter who they are, no matter where they are in life, whether they're little babies walking around or just learning to walk, or whether the elderly who need help crossing the street or getting out or getting into their car, wherever they are, wherever we are in life. Can we see Jesus in each other? Can we open our eyes like Bartimaeus' eyes were open to see the fullness of God, to know that Jesus is alive in our lives? That opportunity comes to us every day. Will we take advantage, as Bartimaeus did, to say, I want to see, I want to be complete, I want to be one with you?